Fitbit on her wrist kept tracking her heart rate, nearly 10 minutes after the last person saw her. Brooklyn, Iowa. A quiet, rural town with fewer than 1,500 people. A place where folks still leave their doors unlocked, and car keys sit right there in the ignition. On the evening of July 18th, 2018, Mollie Tibbetts, a 20-year-old college student, the girl next door, the one who used to babysit for half the neighborhood, went out for a run, just like she always did. But this time, she never came back. No one heard a scream. No one saw a chase. There was no blood, no crime scene, just a phone left behind at home, and a car parked out front, untouched. Her family called, texted, searched. Her boyfriend, the one she lived with, thought Mollie had fallen asleep at a friend's place. Neighbors assumed she'd gone out of town for the weekend, but when she didn't show up for work at the kids' summer camp the next morning, that vague unease turned into full-blown panic. The search stretched out over 34 days. More than 500 volunteers, drones in the sky, tens of thousands of dollars in reward money. But beneath all that noise was a haunting silence. Mollie had vanished, like mist slipping away into the warm Iowa night. Mollie Cecilia Tibbetts was born in 1998 in San Francisco, but her childhood wasn't shaped by oceans or city streets. After her parents divorced, she moved with her mother to a small town in Iowa where cornfields stretched to the horizon and strangers still greet each other by name. There was nothing particularly special about Brooklyn, Iowa, except that Mollie was there. This brown-haired, bright-eyed girl quickly became the heart of the community. Friends remembered her laugh, the way she hugged tight instead of just patting your back, the handwritten notes she'd leave for anyone going through a tough time. One friend once said, "Mollie wasn't the kind of person who walked into a room and made everyone look at her. She was the kind who made you feel like you were the most important person in the room." In high school, Mollie loved literature and theater. She starred in Our Town her junior year, her voice soft and airy, like wind brushing over open fields. After graduation, she enrolled at the University of Iowa to study psychology, with dreams of becoming a counselor for children who had experienced trauma. In the summer of 2018, Mollie came back to Brooklyn to live with her boyfriend and worked part-time at a children's summer camp run by the local hospital. To the people of Brooklyn, Mollie was the embodiment of everything small towns want to believe about themselves: kindness, trust, and a young woman with a bright future. They saw her every day, walking to the corner store, jogging at sunset, laughing on the porch. She wasn't just part of the community. She was part of the scenery. So when she vanished, the pain didn't just belong to her family. It felt like a tear through the very center of a place that had always felt safe. And there was something even her family didn't know. Mollie had a ritual at the end of each day. She wrote in a handwritten journal, not to vent or complain, but to list the little things she was grateful for, like she was training her heart to stay soft. A foggy morning, a little boy learning to swim, a silly joke from her boyfriend. And that's how her family found a small but chilling secret. After Mollie went missing, they discovered her notebook tucked under her pillow. Inside, the last line she ever wrote, on July 17th, just one day before she disappeared, was, "I think I'm being followed when I run, but maybe I'm just paranoid." No one in her family had ever heard Mollie say she felt unsafe. If anything, she was the one who made others feel at ease. So if she didn't say anything, was it because she didn't want to worry anyone? Or because she knew no one would believe her? At the time, Mollie was living with her boyfriend, Dalton Jack, in the apartment he shared with his brother Blake. She took care of Dalton's Boston Terrier while he worked out of town on a construction job. Their relationship was described as sweet, but not without its gaps. Mollie once told a friend that Dalton wasn't great at emotional communication, but he tries. Her family lived just a few blocks away. Her mother, Laura Calderwood, was a strong woman who had raised 3 kids on her own after the divorce. Laura believed in giving her daughter freedom and privacy, so when Mollie didn't respond to a text that evening, she assumed her daughter had just fallen asleep somewhere. It wasn't until the hospital called to report Mollie never showed up to work that chill finally ran down her spine. By the morning of July 19th, the entire town had come to a halt. News of Mollie's disappearance spread faster than anything else. Faster than the weather, faster than the harvest. People dropped what they were doing to join the search. The local baker made a fresh batch of bread and delivered it to the command center. An elderly man brought out his old binoculars to scan the fields. Kids asked their parents, "Is she just lost?" But quietly, deep down, many of the adults already sensed the truth. Mollie wasn't the kind of girl who just got lost. She had written that she felt like she was being watched, but no one knew. July 18th, 2018 began like any other day. Mollie got up early, fed the dog, had breakfast over FaceTime with her boyfriend, Dalton, who was working in a town over an hour away. Then, she got ready for her job at the summer camp where she helped care for children. A temporary gig, but one that meant something to her. She wore a red t-shirt, gray running shorts, tied her hair up, and laced her running shoes, her routine as natural as breathing. That afternoon was hot and humid. The sun hung low over cracked rural roads. At 7:30 p.m., a neighbor's security camera captured Mollie jogging along Boundary Street, her red shirt flashing bright against the dry cornfields. And then, nothing, a silence no one could fill. Dalton, her boyfriend, was the first to sense something was wrong. He texted Mollie that evening, no reply. Called her the next morning, no answer. But what truly alarmed him was a message from her mother. Mollie hadn't shown up at the summer camp, and if there was one thing Mollie never did, it was be late. Dalton called his mom, the owner of the house where Mollie was staying, and asked her to check in. She found Mollie's car still parked out front, her purse and clothes untouched in the room. No sign of her phone, just the Boston Terrier lying quietly in the corner as if waiting for something. The family called the police. Within hours, a full-scale search was underway. Local law enforcement, the FBI, the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, and hundreds of volunteers, all ready to help. They combed gravel roads, irrigation ditches, abandoned barns. Drones swept the fields. Farmers opened their land to investigators. Some believed Mollie had just taken off for a few days, but her friends insisted there's no way she left town without telling someone. She still had shifts at work, books she hadn't finished, and that little silver ring she always took off before bed. It was still sitting on her dresser. And then the days passed, then weeks, then a month. No texts, no calls, no sign of life. The first, and for weeks the only real lead, came from a home surveillance video. Around 7:45 p.m. that night, Mollie appears on the footage, jogging along a residential street. Her face damp with sweat, earbuds in, her slender frame glowing in the fading light. Behind her, a black Chevy Malibu shows up. Then again, same car, same stretch of road, driving in a pattern that didn't feel right. Investigators analyzed the footage frame by frame. At one point, the car speeds up, passes her, then circles back. Once, twice. Mollie doesn't stop running, but she seems to notice. In one blurry frame, her head turns slightly toward the car. That's when investigators began to track the vehicle, and it led to a name, Christian Bahina Rivera. Rivera, 24, worked at a local dairy farm and lived not far from Mollie's running route. When questioned, he first denied knowing anything. But under mounting evidence, especially the surveillance footage and phone data, he began to talk. His statement was fragmented, confusing. He said he saw Mollie jogging, felt drawn to her, and followed in his car. When she noticed and threatened to call the police, Rivera claimed he panicked. And then he blacked out. Couldn't remember what happened next. When he came to, he said Mollie was dead, in the trunk of his car. He couldn't, or wouldn't, say what had happened in the missing time, but he admitted to driving her body to a cornfield, deep between the stalks, and covering her with leaves. Then he led police to the site. On August 21st, 2018, 34 days after she vanished, Mollie Tibbetts was found. Her family was notified that night, and only then a newer, sharper question began to rise. Why? Why would someone target a girl like Mollie, kind, gentle, well-loved, in a small town where everyone knows each other? The community had barely begun to grieve when a national firestorm erupted. Christian Rivera was an undocumented immigrant, and almost instantly, the case became political. Heated debates, headlines, campaign speeches. But amid the noise, one voice quieted the country. Mollie's mother, Laura, said something that stopped the shouting, if only for a moment. Evil has no nationality, it has no skin color, it's just evil. From the moment Christian Rivera led investigators to Mollie's body, something about his story didn't sit right. Rivera claimed he had been driving down the road, saw Mollie, and then blacked out. When he came to, she was in his trunk. But forensic evidence told a different story. Mollie had multiple stab wounds, some so deep they pierced through her ribs. Her death couldn't have happened in some unconscious fog. It took force, intention, time. Rivera's car raised more questions. Yes, Mollie's blood was found in the trunk, but there were no signs of a struggle. No pulled hair, no broken nails, no blood smears. It was as if she'd been unconscious, or already gone, before she was placed inside. When asked why he didn't call the police, Rivera said he was afraid. When asked why he followed Mollie, he said he didn't know. And crucially, no one could verify where Rivera was between 7:45 p.m. and 10 p.m. that night. He lived alone. No alibi. Then, a detail shifted the investigation. Detectives recovered data from Mollie's Fitbit through the company's app, tracking her heart rate and location. It showed her heart rate remained steady for nearly 10 minutes after the last video footage. Then, it spiked, sharply, then gradually fell, then vanished completely. That timeline aligned almost exactly with Rivera's so-called blackout. But that raised a chilling question. If he didn't remember what happened, how did he remember the moment he lost control? There was more. An anonymous tip came into the hotline. Someone had seen a black Malibu parked near the cornfield that night, but inside were two men, not one. Police never made that detail public. When asked later, Mollie's mother said she didn't believe the story was as simple as people made it out to be. She believed in justice, but also believed something hadn't been said. Someone else. Another truth. When the trial of Christian Rivera began in 2021, 3 years after Mollie's death, the public had already decided he was guilty. But inside the courtroom, cracks began to show. Defense attorneys revealed Rivera had been interrogated for over 11 hours, without a lawyer, without a certified interpreter, and with large portions of the questioning left unrecorded. The confession video shown by police only captured the final 20 minutes, when Rivera pointed out where Mollie's body was. The part where he actually confessed? There was no footage. Then, in court, Rivera suddenly changed his story. He claimed that on the night Mollie disappeared, he had been sleeping in his car when two masked men broke in, held him at gunpoint, and ordered him to drive. According to him, they spotted Mollie on the road and told him to stop. They abducted her, later placed her body in his trunk, and forced him to dispose of it, before disappearing. It sounded like something out of a movie, and there was zero evidence to support it. But what unsettled some in the courtroom wasn't the story. It was the fear in Rivera's eyes as he told it. Some former investigators, no longer tied to the case, privately admitted that Rivera didn't fit the profile of a killer driven by lust or rage. He had no criminal record, no history of violence, worked full-time at a dairy farm, kept to himself, had a girlfriend and a young daughter back home. A neighbor, Gloria, a single mother, described Rivera as polite, didn't smoke or drink, once helped shovel snow without asking for anything. But when she learned he'd been arrested, all she said was, "I guess I didn't know him that well. Nobody really knows anyone." One final oddity emerged during the trial. The shoes Mollie was wearing when she disappeared were never found. Not in the car, not at the field, not anywhere. A pair of gray running shoes worn down at the soles, her only possessions that day, gone, as if erased. A private investigator later called them the perfect symbol of this case, a footprint that never left a trace. As closing arguments wrapped, the jury faced a choice between two versions of the truth, a vague confession made without legal counsel or video proof, and a far-fetched tale about two masked men no one ever saw. They chose the first one. A week before Mollie disappeared, she and her boyfriend, Dalton Jack, had a fight. It wasn't unusual for a young couple, but in the swirl of unraveling theories, investigators began to revisit that small detail. Dalton was the first person to report Mollie missing. He fully cooperated with police, helped with the search, and even appeared on television, asking the public for help. When asked about the state of their relationship, he said, "We were good." But that wasn't entirely true. Messages recovered from Mollie's phone revealed she had suspicions Dalton was seeing someone else. She hadn't told her family, but she confided in a close friend, "I don't think Dalton's being honest anymore. I feel like I'm being taken for granted." Another message, sent just days before she vanished, read, "Sometimes I wish I could just disappear for a while." Police asked Dalton where he was that night. He said he was asleep at a hotel near his construction site, more than an hour's drive from Brooklyn. But the exact timing couldn't be verified. No witnesses, no surveillance. Later, Rivera's defense attorney posed a question. Why was Dalton never treated as a suspect? Why did the police trust him so implicitly? A veteran detective told reporters, "We saw no reason to doubt him. Dalton had a good reputation, worked hard, was a native Iowan with no criminal record." But when asked about Rivera, the detective paused, then said, "I just don't think Rivera fit in this community." The contrast was clear. One man was assumed to be good because he was familiar. The other was doubted because he was different. But there was more. Something few people noticed. Initial records showed that Dalton had once been arrested for public disturbance and assault as a minor. No convictions, but it left a trace. He had been suspended from school for fighting. Yet none of this ever made it into the Mollie Tibbetts investigation. People in town began whispering, if his name wasn't Dalton Jack, would the cops have looked harder? In an interview after the trial, Mollie's mother, Laura, was asked, "Do you fully believe in Rivera's conviction?" She paused for a moment, then softly said, "I believe my daughter died at the hands of someone, but I don't believe I know the whole story." In one of Mollie's journals, she wrote about feeling unheard. One entry was messy, scrawled in what looked like a rush of emotion. "He doesn't see me anymore. I'm right here, but it's like I'm gone already." There was one more detail, rarely mentioned. After Mollie's death, Dalton quietly left Brooklyn. He's barely spoken to the media since. A freelance reporter once reached him by email. When asked if he was ever seriously questioned, he replied with just one sentence. "I lost her. That's pain enough. I'm not a killer." But the question haunting many wasn't guilt. It was immunity from doubt. While Rivera, a Mexican immigrant, was interrogated for 11 hours without a lawyer, Dalton, the person closest to Mollie, was trusted completely. And in an America divided by politics, race, and immigration, that doesn't feel like just standard procedure. One sociologist called it implicit bias. Police didn't ignore Dalton on purpose. They simply didn't see the need. Rivera, on the other hand, was the outsider, the unfamiliar face, the one who didn't belong. And so, he became the one to blame. As questions about Dalton surfaced online, his family stayed silent. No lawsuits, no statements, no defenses. Only one person spoke, Mollie's younger sister, who posted a single heart-wrenching message. "There are questions we're afraid to ask because we're not sure we want the answers." And then, like a wave retreating, everything faded. The news stopped. The trial ended. Rivera was sentenced to life in prison. But in a small house in Iowa, Mollie's mother still keeps her daughter's room exactly the way it was. The windows still open each evening to catch the breeze, her running shoes still resting quietly in the corner. Only one thing has changed. On the desk, beside Mollie's photo, there's a small piece of paper, handwritten, the ink beginning to fade. "If something ever happens to me, don't assume you know why." In May 2021, 3 years after Mollie's death, the trial of Christian Rivera came to an end. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Justice, at least on paper, had been served. But just weeks later, something unexpected happened. While preparing Rivera's appeal, his legal team received a phone call from a different prison, where a man named Gavin Jones was being held. Jones was white, had a history of meth use, and had been involved with a local Iowa gang tied to drugs and violence. According to Jones, someone in his group once bragged about abducting and killing a brown-haired girl because she saw something she shouldn't have. That girl, he claimed, was hidden in a car trunk and buried in a cornfield. The details were disturbingly specific. There was no physical evidence, no DNA, no video. But Rivera's lawyers argued the story was too precise to be made up without insider knowledge. One detail shook them. Gavin described a small tattoo on the inside of Mollie's wrist, where she had the words, "Everything happens for a reason," inked in delicate script. A detail almost no one outside her inner circle knew. When news of the statement leaked, public reaction split in two. Some saw it as a desperate attempt to delay justice. Others, especially advocates for criminal justice reform, began to speak out. If this new confession is true, then Mollie's killer is still out there. The crisis wasn't just about who might be guilty. It was about how justice had been carried out. The FBI declined to comment. Iowa police said every lead was thoroughly investigated. But internal documents later revealed Gavin's statement was never officially entered into trial records because it was deemed unverifiable. An anonymous juror later told reporters, "If we'd known there was another confession, we would have asked for a delay, but no one told us." So now, suspicion didn't just fall on a suspect, but on the system, on the gaps, on the things that were missed, or perhaps deliberately left out. And here's the strange part. Gavin Jones's story wasn't the first time someone mentioned two unknown men in the Mollie Tibbetts case. During the first week of her disappearance, police received an anonymous call from a local woman. She claimed to have seen a black car parked near a cornfield, but what caught her attention was this. Inside were two men wearing low-brimmed hats, sitting silently for hours. The call was logged, but never followed up. In court, it was never mentioned. When investigative journalists tracked the woman down, she refused to go public, but she said something chilling. "I told them, but it felt like they were only looking for what they wanted to find." Even within Mollie's family, belief began to fracture. Some held firm that Rivera was the killer. Others, like one of her cousins, wondered aloud if maybe he was just caught in something much bigger. And then came the small things, the details that linger, the ones that don't make headlines but stay with you. Mollie's phone was never found. Authorities were able to trace its GPS location, but the physical device had vanished, as if someone had cleaned up carefully. The Fitbit, the one that had tracked her heart until the very last minute, was never recovered either. The last objects tied to Mollie's life, gone without a trace. A veteran journalist once wrote, "When a case leaves this many questions unanswered, it stops being a case. It becomes an open question." And that was the atmosphere that settled over Brooklyn, Iowa after the verdict. There was a conviction. There was a man behind bars. There was a shattered family. But there was no closure. No ending. The phone. The bracelet. The shoes. All three vanished, along with the truth. 3 years after the trial, the road where Mollie used to run each evening is still there. Boundary Street, the place where a camera captured her final steps, now bears a small wooden sign hand-painted Mollie's Way. A road that leads nowhere. Just a straight line that disappears into the cornfields. On the far end of town, the house Mollie once shared with her boyfriend has new tenants. They don't know what happened there. But one neighbor noticed something. Each evening, a small brown dog still crosses the yard, sits quietly for a few minutes, and then walks home. Mollie's old dog, now gray with age. At her 5th memorial, Mollie's mother read a passage from her daughter's favorite book, The Book Thief. Her voice shook as she reached the line. "I have seen a great beauty in the darkest of things, and I have held on to it, the way people hold on to a half-burned photograph." Then she looked up at the crowd. If my daughter were alive, she wouldn't want revenge. She would want the truth. The truth. But which truth? The one captured on video? The one spoken in a confession? Or the one that was never brought to light? Rivera remains in prison, with no right to appeal. Gavin Jones died of a drug overdose just months after making his claim. Dalton Jack is no longer in Iowa. Witnesses have moved. Newcomers to Brooklyn don't remember Mollie. Only her family remains, still holding an annual memorial walk in her name, Mollie's Run, following the same road where she vanished. They don't speak of Rivera. They don't mention suspects. They only repeat one thing. Mollie believed in light, in kindness, and in forgiveness. But light doesn't mean we stop asking questions.